Okay, here is simplifying radicals. First of all, I like my own way of doing this, but I will show you the traditional way that pretty much every textbook shows. Um, so here we have a radical 20, the square root sign with the number underneath it. We're going to call it a radical. First of all, I just want you to notice what the red numbers on the right-hand column are. These are perfect squares. Perfect squares, you probably recognize a lot of these numbers as being the result of any number times itself. So, 4 is 2 times 2, 36 is 6 times 6. So we have 2 through 13 here. 13 times 13 is 169. So here's the traditional way that pretty much all math teachers I know teach it. So anytime they want to break down a radical, they start like a factor tree. And they just factor it, basically. So 20, I can go ahead and factor tree this. I'll just go ahead and say it's 10 times 2. Okay, so I have a prime number here with the 2. And I'll break down the 10, and it's 2 primes of 5 times 2. Okay, so how we turn this into our result is we look for pairs. So here is a pair, radical 2 and radical 2. When we multiply radical 2 times radical 2, it comes out to a perfect square, which is the result of 2. So basically, the pairs of 2 come out to be a whole number 2. So how we do this is our result is the whole number goes in front and we keep that radical 5 behind. So this is how we break down a radical, and when we break down radicals we can have no decimals. So let's take a look at a couple more. Slightly bigger number, 32. I'll go ahead and say, let's say 8 times 4. Okay, we'll break down this into 2 times 2. 8 is 4 times 2. And it's just going to continue. Okay, so here are all my primes. So let's combine these 2 to make a radical 4, and that becomes a whole number 2. So those become a set of 2. I'll go ahead and combine these 2 to make a radical 4, which turns out to be a whole number 2. So what do we do with all these numbers? So here I have this one right here, we can't forget, this whole number here, and this whole number here. So what do we do with them? Is we multiply them all together. The 2 whole numbers in front with the radical 2 in the back. So in the end result is 2 times 2 times radical 2. So 4 radical 2. Okay, so here's one more that's a little bigger. 48. Let's do 8 times 6. So you can pause this if I'm going too fast. But I'm going to get to all my primes. Okay, so here is a set of 2's. So hopefully you know by now, you've caught on that that's a whole number 2. Comes out to be a whole number 2. I got this guy and this guy come out to be a whole number 2. And I'm left all alone here. This 3 is all by itself. It's a perfect, or not a perfect square, but a radical. So I'm going to multiply those whole numbers and get 4. These 2, this set of 2's, and then a radical 3. So there is my answer. So let me show you my way. Let's go to 32 which I think we've already done. So I think our result of 32, we did 8, we did 4, we did 4, which became 2 2s. We already did this. I'm just hurrying up and doing it all over again. And we did 48 on the page previous. Okay, so there's our result. Let me show you my way. My way is to find the biggest perfect square you can. I put a B for biggest in a square. That goes into 48. So here's what I do. Is I look somewhere around the middle. So 48, about halfway is 25. So I always start about halfway and I move down because I want to find the biggest. So if I started with 4 and it goes into 48, I might stop there and say, oh, it's got to be 4. But I want to find the biggest, so here's my process. I start about halfway through the number and I work backwards. So all that the numbers exist, the only numbers you're going to work with are these red numbers over here. That's the whole reason why I've been putting them over there. So if we look at these whole numbers, I'm not dividing 48 by 6 because it's not on this list. I'm not dividing 48 by 12 because it's not on my list of perfect squares. These are the only numbers I want you to put in your calculators. Okay, so let's start crossing them off. So 25 does not go into 48. Then I move to 16. 16 does. So 16 times 3, if you put that in your calculators, 48 divided by 16 is 3. So here's what we're going to do. This is a perfect square. Take the square root of it. It becomes 4. And move that radical 3 behind it. That is done. So if you find the biggest perfect square, it's a shortcut. There's really either both of these ways. On the left is the traditional. On the right is the way I do it. There's nothing wrong with either way. I just think the way that I approach it is quicker, and you can do any way you want. So here's a 98 and an 80. Okay, so let's break down a 98. So halfway on 98, I'm going to say about 49. So let's look at 98, and I'm going to divide it by 49 on my calculator here. And I already found it. 49 goes into 98 twice. So what do I do now? Is I take the square root of 49, I get 7. Put that radical 2 behind it, and I'm done. Okay, so let's look at 80. I'm going to start around 25 or 36. I know 36 doesn't go in it because 40 does. I know 25 doesn't go into it because those are quarters. Let me check 16 now. So in my calculator, I'm doing 80 divided by 16, and I got it. 16 goes into it 5 times. Okay, so 16 is a perfect square. I'm going to take care of that and make it a whole number 4. And I drop that radical 5 down behind it. So really, if you've been paying attention to the last 3 things I've been doing, the last three problems I've been doing, I've only been concentrating on these perfect squares. It's the only numbers that matter to me. So let's look at 81. 81. You have to be careful sometimes because, notice, 81 is on our list. So what do we do if it's on our list? That means we just take the square root of it, and it equals the whole number 9. There's our answer. We're done. So what happens if your number has a whole number in front of it? Your radical has a whole number in front of it. So basically this just says 3 times radical 48. So what I do is I separate this and I just work with that 48, which I've already done with you. I said it was 16 times 3. We took the square root of 16 and you got 4. So if it has this whole number in front of the radical, I just save it to the end, bring it down, and say 3 times whatever the result of simplifying my radical is. So now it's 3 times 4 radical 3, and I'm done. Okay, so if you remember, I did a radical 80. Okay, and my way, I said let's divide it by 25, doesn't go into it, then I checked 16, and I found 16 times 5, and then all I did was take the square root of 4 and put it in front of that radical, or square root of 16 and put it in front of the radical. So that's the way I do it. Take a look at this traditional way. You find any numbers you want. Let's see, this I think simple is something like 8 times 10. This is the way math teachers usually teach this. In my opinion, I can do this a whole lot quicker, but there is nothing wrong with doing it this way. And then I look for pairs. This becomes a whole number. These combine to make a whole number. And don't forget that radical 5 goes in the back. I just think that is a long process. I multiply those 2 whole numbers I found, and once again I get 4 radical 5. So choose any way you want it. Maybe you like mine. Bottom line is, we just got to know how to get to the final result.